Hello, I'm Dr. Angie McCartney.
And I'm Ruth McCartney.
Welcome to TeaFlix,
where each episode's intimate conversation features a fascinating guest across the spectrum of Beatles world, pop culture, Grammy winners, the music industry, chefs, producers, music stars, actors, and more. So bottoms up and join us as they spill the tea on TeaFlix. And it says we are live.
I'm so glad.
Yep, once again, above ground,
above
ground and breathing, and 80 years since Japan surrendered. It's 80 years to the day of the end of World War II. So let's all think.
I was a ripe old 15 years old then.
Yep. Let's all think peace and love today.
Yes.
Especially with the kind of tough conversation that I think we're going to have about the justice system. There's an oxymoron for you. Today's guest is our wonderful actor friend, Anthony DiMaria. He's a multifaceted American actor, producer, author, and director. He's best known for his passionate work in honoring the legacy of his wonderful uncle, Jay Sebring, an influential hairstylist and fashion icon, tragically killed on Cielo Drive in August of 1969. As an actor, Anthony has built a solid theatrical foundation, performing off-Broadway and in theaters with notable companies like the Barrow Group, the Actors Studio, Neighborhood Playhouse, and Circle Rep Lab. He's appeared in soap operas such as One Life to Live and Guiding Light, or One Loft to Leave, as Kevin Smith used to call it, and secured roles in TV hit shows including The Sopranos, CSI, Deadwood, John from Cincinnati, The Leftovers, Ray Donovan, and Disney's Pixel Perfect. On film, he played Howard Fox in Woody Allen's Cafe Society, and he's had several other notable roles, including in The Pigeon Egg Strategy and High Roller, The Stu Ungar Story, and he also made an appearance in Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. More recently, Anthony directed and produced the feature-length documentary, Jay Sebring, Cutting to the Truth, to reclaim his uncle's identity beyond the sensationalism of his death. The film features interviews with prominent figures like Quentin Tarantino, Nancy Sinatra, Dennis Hopper, Quincy Jones, and more. Since 2004, Anthony has actively represented victims' families, including his own, of course, during parole hearings for the convicted felons. He has consistently opposed parole and urged authorities to remember the gravity of those terrible crimes. He co-authored the highly anticipated book, Jay Sebring, Cutting to the Truth, which was released I was going to say last month, but now it's September, at the end of July 2025. Written with biographer, our dear friend Marshall Terrill, the book features restored facts, interviews, and rich context about Jay Sebring's pioneering career and cultural influence. Anthony also co-authored Bruce Lee, The Jay Sebring Connection, which I knew nothing about until we chatted. Mm-hmm. He lives between Las Vegas, where his family's hairstyling business still continues, and West Hollywood, where he resides with his lady, Maria. So warm welcome to our guest today, Anthony DiMaria.
Hello, Anthony. Good morning.
Hello, Doctor. Hello, Ruth. Angie, it's a pleasure to be here.
It's the doctor in.
The doctor's in.
With medicine.
She's brought her prescription.
Salute.
Yes.
Salute. So thank you for taking the time. I don't know how many plates you've got spinning in the air, but I really appreciate Marshall Terrill putting us together. So thank you, Marshall, and also to the good folks at Genius Books who helped put this all together. So Ange, lead off with your first question, why don't you?
As both a family member and a filmmaker, how did you balance personal emotion and with journalistic objectivity? My goodness, that's a mouthful. With journalistic objectivity while researching and writing this book?
That is a fantastic question. And, you know, when I first started with the film and I was going to direct it as a blood relative and then also co-write it with Marshall Terrill, the book, a big concern of different people was that, you know, you're a blood relative. So are you too subjective? Maybe you're too close to this. And I thought that is a very important point, but also something to be aware of when telling a definitive story, a comprehensive one, in which we're not trying to do a tribute or deification of somebody, but tell that. So I really appreciate that you bring this up. And it got me thinking, this is many years ago, I was thinking, it's a valid point to question if I might be too close to the subject matter. And I would be if I was doing a tribute film, if I was only trying to. But if I looked at things forensically and with with his successes and challenges, then that would change things. But I also realized in the context of the entire story with regard to Jay as the American dream, also as Jay being a victim in one of the most notorious murders in United States history, that perhaps maybe some people aren't close enough to the realities that are centered, that are involved in Jay Sebring's life, death, and legacy. And so whether it be with Johnny Bishop, my co-producer and editor, cinematographer, Chad Lane, also producer, and with Marshall, we always were focused on what is the point of the story. And the story is to tell an objective, forensic biographical look into a culturally and historically relevant figure, And so I really appreciate that question.
Yeah, it must have been difficult to
very.
Take off the nephew hat and put on the professional Hollywood hat, but you've done a fantastic job. And
wonderful.
We all watched the documentary as well, which you can find on Amazon Prime through Shout TV. It's really, really well done, and the interviews are just stunning. What do you feel when you first started the film, which came before the book, obviously? What do you feel is the most the thing that people don't know about Jay's contribution to not just men's hairstyling, but popular culture overall?
Again, great question, and it requires a comprehensive look in all of these things. So Jay literally embodies the American dream. So for anyone who wants to know about Hollywood or being an entrepreneur, creating a men's hair industry and hair care, he was the first to create an organic pH balance hair care product line 8 years before Vidal Sassoon. He created an industry that today, globally, annually, it generates more than $100 billion. So there's that aspect. And then there's the aspect of how Jay elevated things. So today, well, first of all, before Jay, men went to barbers and they picked one cut out of a barber chart and had it slapped on their head. And the extent of your style was, where do you part it, on the left or the right? You know what I'm saying?
Like North Korea is, that you have it's almost like a row of postage stamps and you say you want that one, right?
Yeah. And
short back and sides was the expression that comes
fade
to
and
me.
a flat top. Yeah.
Yes, as a matter of fact, Paul McCartney actually said that to Jay, and Jay mentions that in his film, that in London they had met. And by the way, which is interesting, and I don't mean to segue because I want to get back to but Brian Epstein called the Sebring Salon on Fairfax Avenue, just north of Melrose in West Hollywood. And he spoke with Jay's secretary. Can you imagine well, he wasn't a barber, but a men's hair cutter who has a secretary, right? So he called Gordon Mullinger, and Gordon Mullinger took the call, and he was asking that Jay cut all the Beatles' hair. So what ended up happening is that the only way they could do that, because of the security, and you all know, most of us know, the mania that was happening in the 60s throughout America as well. But the city said the only way they would allow it is if they shut down Fairfax Avenue. I mean, and so West Hollywood said, no, you can't do that. So the Beatles never got their haircut by Jay because of that, But that's a side note.
I was telling Anthony when we first met that my brother Mike, Paul's brother Mike, McCartney, graduated from the Peter Collins Hair Institute for Men in Liverpool. And so, obviously Peter Collins and Vidal Sassoon, you mentioned, these people wouldn't exist as brands without Jay Sebring. So it ties that whole knot back that, my other brother, Mike McCartney, saw this as a potential profession. And so did Ringo. Ringo wanted to be a hairdresser.
Yeah.
Yeah. What Vidal said? He said, it's amazing what hair can do. I hate to do a bad, Vidal, but we spoke for about 2 hours, and the man was so indelible. And he says, you literally can sculpt the landscape of a city through architecture. And in hair, you can reframe and change the face. Yeah. And that's what Jay did. He customized to the individual's face. Mm-hmm. But to get back to your point about some of the things that, Bruce Lee was, he lived in Oakland, and his dream in coming to America was to open dojos. He had no idea that of any ever doing, being an actor. And Jay discovered him at the 1969 Ed Parker Internationals and introduced him to William Dozier. And as Linda Lee, Bruce's wife, said, his entire film career resulted as a result of Jay Sebring. And then, of course, you have the Jim Morrison haircut, in which Elektra Records, they hired Jay to literally transform Jim Morrison's image. He essentially from a Roadhouse rocker to a rock and roll sex symbol. And to this day, we see that picture, that iconic cut everywhere. But one of the things that is astounding and was really, when I spoke with Nancy Sinatra and Quincy Jones and Dennis Hopper, and I saw the love and the emotion and the respect for Jay, it really became apparent that Jay was not just a celebrity hairstylist or that he was relevant because of his doing that, but he really was, inside elite circles, the star among the star. And when reading the book and seeing the film, I think viscerally we can see that. And it's evident.
Well, he was a real connector and mover and shaker, wasn't he? I mean, he was sort of the center of the wheel.
Absolutely. I had a great conversation with William Friedkin, the director who did The Exorcist and
in LA.
Yeah, and did Live and Die in LA, definitely. And then, The French Connection, which he won the Oscar. And I was fortunate through one of Jay's proteges, Joe Torrenueva, to get to know, I call him Billy because everybody did, but William Friedkin quite well. And he asked me what I thought of Quentin Tarantino's film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Also, I was thanked in Quentin Tarantino's film because our family shared a lot of. So I wasn't actually in the film, but but Quentin was great and very supportive of Jay's story, as we know. He did an interview. But Billy said something to me, and he said, "What'd you think of that movie, Anthony?" And I said, "I think that Quentin, for the first time in any narrative whatsoever, that Jay and Sharon were treated as being relevant just for being who they were, and not being relevant because they were killed in a notorious murder." Right. And Billy said, "But Anthony, I just want you to know, Jay was not some third wheel lurking in the shadows. He was one of the most powerful men on the entire planet." Now he knew, and people in the inside circles knew this, and yet, to Quentin Tarantino, to his point in his interview, he said, "I'm not claiming to do Sharon or Jay's story. I'm including them in my story." So to really, so that's the context of all of that as well.
Right. It's a real, obviously you can't tell a story in Hollywood that takes place within the zeitgeist of that summer and not at least touch on it in some kind of way. It must have been difficult for Quentin to sort of figure out, well, I have to say something. It's the elephant in the room. How do I weave that into an otherwise, typical Tarantino film?
Yeah. I was when I learned that Jay and of course the subplot was on Sharon and Jay was a peripheral character in that. But when I heard this and I didn't know how Quentin was going to treat it, I was very concerned. Not so much about because of Quentin. I loved what he did in Inglourious Bastards. I love that film. It's one, and so many others. But I was just concerned that if in any way that Jay, Sharon, Abigail Wojtek, Stephen, any of the victims were treated as in any kind of a narrative that would marginalize them, it concerned me. And also if the killers were glamorized in any way, that concerned me. And I said this to Quentin in our initial meeting, and I said to Quentin, "You're different. You're so talented. And what you do has cultural impact. Yeah. And so if you do any of these things in any way, it's going to have a massive impact, for better or for worse, depending." And he very graciously said, "Thank you very much for saying that." And he said, "I'm not really interested in any of the things that you're concerned about. How about you sign an NDA, you read the script, and we talk more." And then we continued to talk for another hour after that. So, he was an extraordinarily stand-up, forthright man and talented, obviously. And also Shannon McIntosh, his partner and producer, phenomenal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Speaking back to the day.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Vic Damone played an integral part, didn't he, in the beginning? How did Jay's innovations in grooming him eventually influence Hollywood and the fashion industry in general?
It's a great question, because Jay was really struggling. I mean, he had to almost educate people that it's okay for a man to shampoo, condition your hair, style it, blow dry it. I mean, that was unheard. That was going to a beauty salon, and at that time, men went to barbershops, women went to beauty salons, and so when he did this, he's really struggling because people really weren't up to where he was in his revolutionary vision. Yeah. And through a girlfriend, actress Barbara Luna, she introduced Vic Damone to Jay. And then Vic, like for him, he said it was transformative. So he flies to Las Vegas, and Jack and Trotter, the head of entertainment at the Sands Hotel, he sees this. He goes, what did you do? And he goes, this guy in West Hollywood just cut my hair. And so he says, I got to meet this guy. So they flew him to the Sands, and then Jay cut Jack's hair. And then as a result, Jay became the personal stylist to the entire Rat Pack, with the exception of Dean Martin. And there's a great picture of them. It's in the book, by the way. So when you look at the book, look at the difference, the way Sinatra's hair just melts into his face. And then also Peter Lawford and Joey Bishop and Sammy Davis. But then look at Dean Martin. He's got clumps of hair, and it's a subtle thing, but that was really the beginning, as Barbara Luna said, the beginning of a monster, because Vic Damone gave him $100, and at that time it was $1,000. So Jay started thinking, I think I'm going to start charging whatever the hell I'm worth. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, but then after that, he did Spartacus. He was hired by Kirk Douglas to design that cut, and so that was. Vic Damone really opened the door for Jay to define the looks, not only for a great haircut for the actor, but to help them sculpt a look specific to the characters they were playing.
Yes, yeah.
You see what I'm saying? And this was a huge thing. And like before, if you had a barber cut, if you had big ears, if you have big ears and they're sticking out, Jay would keep it fuller to not big. If you had a huge schnoz and you're doing clippers, he would keep it fuller in the back to make it look more
balanced.
Yes, balanced, exactly right. And so that's when he exploded into Hollywood, and it was the defining of images of characters, but the actors themselves.
Yes,
it's almost like, to me, when you did the profile and the shape and all of that, it's almost, to me, he was painting with scissors.
Mm-hmm. That's a beautiful way to describe it. I've never heard that description before.
Well, but for 1,000 years, so it just popped out of my head. So
no, it's a great point.
You can have that one.
I should have stolen. I wish you would have said that to me when we started writing the book.
It's all right. Well, there's still
the next one,
plenty of meat on that bone.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it truly is. It's art. When you look at, when you think about Dean Martin's image all the way through until the end, he still had a haircut kind of like a school bus driver, right?
Yeah.
Like an average Joe. I mean, he was a great looking man, but he never really ebbed into the times or the fashion or the, again, the zeitgeist of it, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting why he may or may not have. It might have been loyalty. He may not have gotten along with Jay. That was one of the things, is that Jay, again, he was aware that everybody was coming to him. And an interesting example is that it's not that his ego was as big, but he knew that he was and so some people weren't used to that. And Elvis is a perfect example, because Elvis was used to people revolving around him, and Jay was kind of saying, no, you're here because of me. And numerous people have said that they kind of clashed a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and also, again, when we were talking, the hairdresser sometimes is the closest thing that most people will get to therapy, right?
Mm-hmm.
To a therapist.
Mm.
You're in a chair, and in the Sebring salon on Fairfax, he had these private rooms for obvious reasons. So they probably had a cocktail and sat down, and this was not only visually
it's like a confessional, probably.
Yeah, like a confessional. Almost. He was probably the keeper of a lot of secrets too.
Mm-hmm.
There's absolutely there was a recent book, and Jay was notoriously private, and not private because of himself, but he was notoriously private for his clients. And it was almost like an attorney-client privilege. So he knew the people who had toupees. He knew the people that he was coloring and how he styled the toupees. And he was doing all of these things. He knew who was having affairs. He knew, I mean, he was from Michigan, and he had those kind of Midwestern values that I think was very appreciated and trusted in these elite circles. But, Cammie, Jay's wife, tells an interesting story, and this speaks to that confidence. And so Bobby Darin was one of Jay's, they were best of friends. And sometimes Bobby and Sandra Dee would be on the outs. And so Jay would invite him over to the house on Easton, which was Jean Harlow's former house. And he would allow him to stay there in the guest bedroom. And one day he was off at the studio or at the shop, Cammie describes. And Cammie says, Bobby came down the stairs and I started giggling because he had no hair. And so, and so she said she felt bad, but she said, Jay never told me, his own wife, you know what I'm saying? He never, and Bobby, and so again, and Bobby was a great guy. He's a great looking guy, whether he had hair or not. But the point of it is that kind of protection and privacy, exactly.
Elizabeth is just saying you resemble your uncle. I agree. I was looking through your IMDb, and you do have a lot of his good looks. Don't tell Maria I said that. But,
Well, I have to say thank you to that. And anytime I hear it, actually, Quentin shook my hand when we first met, and he looked back. He's a tall man.
Yes, maybe, I met him. Yeah,
or maybe I'm short. I don't know, but but he did say you do favor your uncle, and that's a huge compliment whenever I hear that, because he was a dynamic person.
Absolutely stunning. So, Ange had a question about the order in which you did things.
Yeah, having completed the film first, how long did it take you to research and complete the materials for the book? And what was the most surprising discovery you made along the way?
Oh, gosh.
New discoveries between when you did the film and when you did the book with Marshall.
Mm-hmm.
Did you uncover new stuff? I mean, obviously.
I did. And so, okay, that's good. So the research and the interviews that we did were upwards of like 90 people, and a vast majority who knew Jay, and then everyone else. And so I used a tremendous amount of the research we did for the film into the book. And then, of course, my grandparents, it is almost as if they knew that their son, but they kept everything. They kept notes from all their children and everything. But I had such a wealth of material from my grandparents that Jay saved from a letter that my mother was only like 8, I think, when she wrote to him in the Navy on a destroyer ship. Who keeps all these things? And so I had so much to work with, such a wealth to work with. And one of the district attorneys I had worked with in the past, Donna Leibowitz is her name. She's great, but she said, and she's retired now, but she said, Anthony, usually the book is first, the film is second. And that's an interesting point. And as you're asking too, Ange, it's that the book was written because a lot of new books and narratives, sensationalism have been exploited that continue to marginalize the victims. And then also the fight for justice has really been hanging in the balance because of what's happening in the state of California. So our family's fights for justice, and again, a continuation of a narrative that the victims were illicit or bizarre or perverse or any of these things, it continues even today. So this book, I really felt the need that needed to be out there, not only for Jay and all the victims in our families, but for all victims of violent crime who are fighting for justice. And also in terms of the media, and I don't want to be too specific in this, but it really is pretty glaring that people will sculpt. What's happening now is that stories are being sculpted and not just written about, as they say, just the facts, ma'am. You know what I mean? And so
spin babies.
Yeah, exactly. And if it bleeds, it leads, and don't let the facts get in the way of a great story. And so,
as Jim McCartney would say, the only thing you can believe in a newspaper is the date and the price.
Unfortunately, and so that really necessitated the book. and then also more research. So we interviewed more people. Like for instance, I learned that Pat Boone, he was responsible. He was doing a show in which Sharon Tate, a young teenager, was there with her mother, and he put her on the screen, and that was literally her first screen. It was the Pat Boone Chevy show, I think, and Pat. So there was some of those things that were really a lot of discovery. And so we interviewed so many more people, Marshall and I, and it was extensive, and there has been so much. But I think one of the things that really, as time moved on, I've always wanted to know, how could it be that Jay Sebring, somebody doing these things of cultural and historical relevance, elevating an industry and people's lives, changing people's lives, doesn't matter, not just in hair, but launching people's film careers like Bruce Lee, when Hollywood didn't think Asian actors could play Asian characters. That's insane.
My God, we had the terrible makeup and people in blackface and good,
it's insanity. And so we had all these things happening, and Jay was changing things. And I thought, we have to have this be known. But I was always asking, how could it be that here's this man doing these things and these people doing nothing, and then horrible things, and then somehow after the murders, this happens.
They're the rock stars. Yeah,
they're the rock stars, and Jay is a low-life scumbag. And why did that happen? And so, in the research that I was doing, it was like there was two different Jay Sebrings: the man who lived, and a man portrayed as a prototype, defenseless in his grave. And so I wanted to know, why didn't Vincent Bugliosi put Jay's definitive actions in the last moments at that living room in Cielo Drive? Why was it alleged in Time magazine that Jay was anti-Negro when he actually had Quincy Jones, Sammy Davis, Sam Cooke, Calvin Lockhart in his circle of very good, true friends? And his staff was completely integrated with all kinds of races, sex orientations, and women and men and everything.
Well, just the Bruce Lee story alone. It's like what Sinatra did for Sammy Davis Jr. Right. Your uncle did for Bruce Lee and Asians. He was fighting racism with his actions.
That's exactly right. And also he would go to Sammy Davis's house when Sammy married Mai Britt, and they were getting death threats. So Jay would go to their house and cut Mai and Sammy and the children's hair. Jay he really believed in people. Wardell Jackson was cutting hair at Jay's place from 1961 to Jay's death. And again, this is the most exclusive place on the planet, because you have Jesse Big Daddy Unruh, the Speaker of the House in California, who was Jay's friend and client from 61 through his death. You had all these politicians and attorneys and producers, and you had, again, everything was happening through the connections and everything. And yet Jay had, before anyone ever heard the word diversity, and these are very noble movements, but Jay did it organically and embodied it.
And from a place of love all, serve all, right?
Exactly. But the thing is like, how is it that Jay's being characterized in all these horrible things? And then I realized it was because at first when these murders happened, and this was a huge discovery for me in the machination of it, in the industrial complex of not only notorious true crime and murder, but there's a dynamic in the narrative, and that is, if we're going to package and sell these horrible crimes for consumption, the first thing we must do is strip the victims of their humanity. Now I can profit guilt-free, and now my consumers can enjoy this all guilt-free. And I learned that, again, I have to be careful in how I say this. Right. There was some leaking from law enforcement agencies through the media. And again, now you have this article, and now this is my opinion, but it's a very educated, informed opinion. So the things that were said in a polygraph are suddenly in Time magazine. How would that information get in there? And this was false information because law enforcement had these preconceived notions that this was a drug deal gone bad, or kinky illicit behavior. And that's why these murders happened. So they're leaking. And so the murders were treated as a morality tale of Hollywood decadence.
Yeah.
Put your kids in the army, keep them away from pot.
Exactly. But here's the thing, Jay became the ultimate fall guy. And one of the things that's interesting is even people in the inner circle of Jay and Sharon's friends, people had to preserve their reputations, and they could not be by osmosis. I mean, this was at a time if they found out you smoked a joint, it could end your career.
Oh.
Now there was a half a joint at the scene. There was some other things at the house, and we can go into the details and on Jay's possession that was recreational. But people started saying, even like Steve McQueen said, "Hey, I didn't dig that weird scene." Well, Steve was best friends with Jay, but everybody ran for the hills and said, "Yeah, exactly, Ruth, not me. No. I'm not part of that. No.
Here.
And so what happens is now you have, let's say, if some film directors or some movie studios could be taken down, well, there's got to be a fall guy. Him, not me. So I saw a lot, and what I've learned is, and you can see it through the patterns and the timing. Unfortunately, some friendly fire in all of this. And, it's ironic that, Jay was called this really kinky pervert guy a little surprising by some people. And I'm going to, refrain. It's in the film and the book. But the bottom line is, the irony is, if Jay was so troubled and insecure and perverted, that he certainly was in no shortage of a lot of beautiful women wanting to spend a lot of time with him throughout his life. And so if there was whatever the heck he was doing, it was working. and yet some of the people who are making these allegations, we find out, well, actually, maybe they have some problems. And so do you see what I'm saying? And so.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the perfect scapegoat is a dead scapegoat, right? Because they can't argue.
That's exactly right. And then once the murderers are found, now it's a morality tale, not of Hollywood decadence. Now that's just and Quentin Tarantino addresses this beautifully in the book and also the film. Now they just forget that whole narrative, and now let's do the morality tale on the hippie movement. So don't be a hippie, otherwise you'll be controlled and you'll kill. And that is something that I really wanted to hit home with Marshall, because there's certain things you can do in a book that you can't do in a film and vice versa. But we really obliterate this bullshit narrative of a hippie cult and as killers being followers.
Well, and a lot of what you said to me, and I'm getting questions in the chat that are using the name "We Shall Not Speak." That's why I'm not putting them on the screen. But Elizabeth's asking, didn't California also repeal the death penalty shortly before the guilty verdicts? I'm not putting it on the screen because it's got the name in it, and we don't want.
That's fine, and I appreciate that and respect that, and I can handle addressing that name, but I thank you, Ruth. So the order was they were all convicted to death to die in the gas chamber, and then in 1971, and I'm pretty sure that's the right date, the California Supreme Court decided that the death penalty was cruel and unusual punishment. So then what happened was
it wasn't.
Yeah, well, exactly. But I mean, that's a whole nother thing. And unfortunately, so then what happened was the state of California only had death, then life with possibility of parole. There was no such thing as life without. So they were all automatically brought down to life with possibility. So then from there, once the state, very soon after, and by the way, by the constituents voted to reinforce the death penalty, then it was reversed either by the voters but it was reversed. But the problem was you can't resentence them to death after that. So from that time on, 7 years later, they all became up for parole. But my grandparents and parents met with the LAPD and LADA's office after these rulings, and they said, and they were promised that none of these people would actually be released. It was purely a technicality. And over the course of time, that's not the case.
No, you were shocked to learn about in the book, right?
Yeah, how many people were paroled? I have no idea.
Yes, and many people don't realize this, but there's the Board of Parole hearings. When they find an inmate or a killer, or they call them lifers, suitable for release, they are granted a release date, and then it takes a month for the transcripts to be transcribed, and then they send it to the governor's office. The governor's office then speaks with his legal team, and he decides whether to reverse the the parole board's decision to release or not. And now what's happening is if the governor does, then they just file an appellate court, and based on how some of the judges are positioned with regard to decarceration, the tendency is to release them. And then the last option is for the governor to file in the Supreme Court, which unfortunately, as is outlined in the book, Governor Newsom did not fight for. And I'm very confident with, having spoken at half a dozen of her parole hearings as a LaBianca family representative, the lack of insight and her mitigation and minimization, she would have been obliterated through case laws of Lawrence, Chaputis, Shigemura, Rosencrantz. If rigorously fought, we would have won.
Wow. Yeah, it's Elizabeth's just asking again, and it's okay, honey. You didn't know. I should have announced at the top that we're not going to speak that name today. But she's also asking, didn't one of the parolees, wasn't that one of the people that went after President Reagan? Is that the same group, same crowd?
Oh, no. Yes, but no, so she is correct that Lynette Fromm was released. And Lynette Squeaky, they called her Fromm.
Yeah,
right.
I remember.
Paul's right.
And she was convicted of the attempted assassination of Gerald Ford. And I think that was 1974.
Wow.
And what happened was she got very close, and the gun jammed. So had the gun gone off, so.
Yeah.
Wow, unbelievable. So how do you said half a dozen or more parole hearings, have they all been on behalf of the Sebring family, or have you've obviously advocated for other people? How on earth do you mentally prepare and spiritually prepare yourself for that?
Unfortunately, our family's been involved. My sister, my mother, in over 24 paroles. So of course, the first time you go, it's quite an experience. It is traumatic. You don't know how you're going to speak. You don't want to get overwhelmed with emotions. You don't want to be angry. You don't want to do these things. But and one of the things I always am mindful of, and I know my family, is to not overstate or not to misspeak, and also to include all the victims and treat them as if they're our own, and they are, because we're bound by these crimes.
Yes.
And similar loss. But I learned something with Susan Atkins one time, and my mother and my father were in the room, and Susan Atkins said, and this goes to your, how do I prepare? Because it's a touchstone for me to always remember why I'm there. And so Susan Atkins one time said that she learned, and I'm paraphrasing at this point, but when her death sentence was revoked, that she realized that that her reversal was larger than any law or institution or any person, or the anger that I feel towards me in this room today. And I thought to myself, now see, here's part of the problem that is very enraging, is that these people are convicted, cold-blooded killers who spit on the memory of their victims, taunted our families, and gave a big finger to civilized society during their trials. They smeared messages in their victims' blood. They used butcher knives and carving forks. So for them now to try to prop themselves up as being the victims of their own crimes, and this is what's happening in these parole hearings.
Yep.
And when she said this, it was so out of touch and so despicable.
Now, are you in a room with a screen, or you were actually in a physical room with this person?
Well, before COVID, we always went to the prisons, and typically there's 2, sometimes 3 commissioners. Sometimes there's there's a reporter and a news camera. There's armed guards. There's attorneys for the inmate, and some support members for the victim support people, and of course victims' family members. So that's what happens in the room typically. After COVID, a lot of these things are now conducted electronically through, like similar to Zoom. But when Atkins said, larger than the hatred I feel towards me in this room today, she's the victim. My mother said, I don't feel hatred. I feel pain and loss. I said,
wow.
I don't feel anger. I'm not here for Susan Atkins.
Right.
I'm here to speak out for Jay.
Yeah.
Love.
Oh.
So
Amen.
I think that I think that was a seminal moment for me when I thought, wow, things are getting away from reality.
Yeah.
And that, this is about the victims. This is about our families, but it's about the victims. So whenever I have any questions or whatever, I just go back to that. I go back to what they went through, and what they could have done,
and what Jay heroically tried to do, which was never really reported.
No.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up, because from that moment, my mother told me, some people said, okay, you're 3 years old, you didn't know your uncle, but that's fine. If they want to say that, that's fine. They also never met Jay. And Jay was a dynamic, charismatic man, and anyone would tell you that, and glowingly, as Nancy Sinatra did, or Quincy, or, these people really loved and looked up to him.
It was family. They were the part of this Hollywood.
Absolutely.
Crazy
But he was also a dynamic force. I mean, he knew, not only did he know how to do a great haircut, he had exquisite taste. He knew great quality. He demanded that through expressing himself, whether it be through clothes, cars. He certainly regarded this with regard to women and his own hair, but he also shared that with his clients. Right. And so people saw this. So when you see, Steve McQueen regarded as the king of cool, it's not pre-Sebring. It's not, the Blob. It's the Thomas Crown Affair. It's The Great Escape. It's Bullet. Yes. I mean, and that was some of his clients literally channeling Jay through his presence, the way his dynamic qualities. And so when I was told I could never see him again, I was looking at this beautiful black and white photo that is the very first photo in the book, and that we opened the film on. And that was the photo I was looking at. And I said to my mom, when can I see? And she looked at me, and I, as a child, I don't know if I was 5, 4, but I remember there's that guy that used to come here and we would play, and it was like my cool friend. But my mother looked at me and didn't start weeping or anything, but it was a look that shook me to my core. And I realized I never want to cause that kind of pain to my mother ever again.
No.
So this is something that I stared when she walked away. I stared at that picture, and it was like a vortex pulling me in. And I said, it was weird. Like, there was this feeling of being drawn in, and he was looking at me, I felt. And maybe it's because I wanted that.
Yeah.
I was like, why can't I see you again? Where are you? What do you mean? Like, and then I was like, I don't think I articulated it the way those previous thoughts, but I had this urge to know everything about him from that moment, boom, for the rest of my life. And maybe that's why the book came also after, because there was more to learn and more to address. Yeah. But that was the beginning of something. And so when I started reading things on my own, in my own endeavor to know the truth, when I read Bugliosi's book, it was disgusting what he wrote about Jay. And I was ashamed of my uncle, I'm sad to say. And I believed that it had to have been true if the DA was writing these words. And so I had to know more. And that's why I learned some of these other crazy things that were written. And I was prepared to know the truth, whether I liked it or not. And the more I learned, wait a minute, this didn't happen. Wait, it wasn't like this. So then these were red flags that said, wait a minute, this is something more than my own journey. This is something that is setting a historical record straight. Yeah. This is much larger than my uncle. This is Jay Sebring, a historically, culturally relevant figure who changed the world in his own way. And a narrative, an understanding of these historic moments that need to be understood in a real way. And so when I found out that what Jay did in the last moments of his life twice, well, I said 3, twice, it was mind-blowing that he definitively, aggressively, and it's extensively covered in the book and in the film, but really extensively. I know. And I wanted to ask Bugliosi, why did you omit that from your book?
Yeah, lying by omission is one of the dangerous parts of media, isn't it? You just, if you don't tell the truth, you don't make it be known. So you're not telling a lie, but boy, people don't get to know the good stuff. And then all the whole thing with, nowadays, all of the conspiracy theories and that place called the internet, where, it was all a movement from, MK Ultra, and it was the CIA, and it was a doctor in a clinic in San Francisco, and they just want to pin it on anything, don't they?
You're right, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because the person who's really promulgating that book and that narrative, I've known him for 20 years, and I've shared information with him throughout that time. And he spoke with my mother for almost 2 hours, and he omitted all that from his book. And so anyone promulgating this whole CIA, but you're not telling the blood, sweat, and tears of the story, because it gets in the way of the narrative that you're sculpting.
Your truth. Yeah,
that's right. And what I'm so glad you brought this up, because our book, the film always was, but this book, from a comprehensive level, is backed up extensively with evidence, forensics, corroboration, hard copy facts, and it obliterates all this sensational exploitative nonsense. And so once people realize that that's a bunch of hogwash, the CIA, the MK Ultra, and whatever, once they realize that, the Martians are coming in, and we'll have the Martians involved somehow in these horrible crimes. And it's that insipid and that satirical.
Yeah, and all the other bodies are buried at Area 51. Yeah, I know.
Oh yeah. No, I think you just gave someone an idea that is going to launch the narrative of the Martians and this. It's sad.
It truly is. Ant had a question about the challenges. I mean, how did you?
Yeah, were there particular challenges in telling the stories of fact and getting away from some of the myths in Jay's life?
How did you and Marshall, when you sat down to do the book, how did you approach? Okay, there's
how
all this
bollocks
and bullshit over here that people have been fed for years, and now here's our definitive evidence and our interviews and our forensics. As writers, it's a tough road to sell a new narrative, which is actually the truth.
That's exactly right. I mean, and that's, well, first of all, the biggest challenge anytime you're doing something independently, whether it be the film, we had no funding. I mean, and I can't tell you, thank my parents, Tony and Peggy DiMaria, they were producers, and they were providing all these resources, both in material and financially. And then, of course, Voss Beretta and Chad Lane, he was amazing. Everybody was amazing. But without them, it would have been very difficult. And that's part of the problem. If I was waiting for studio funding, none of this would have ever happened. None of it. So sometimes you have to do something without being paid for it, at least initially. But in terms of like the fact and the fiction, Marshall was, I so appreciated the fact that he just listened to some of the things that I would say, and then what he would do is he would contribute, and it was great, another set of eyes that would be like, I want to interview, we should interview, Ivor Davis or some of these other people that he had knowledge of, and that also had other perspectives with these crimes and or killers or the victims. And so he was just we were very thorough. And so because of so much that was accomplished in the research and for the documentary, and because of so much of the love and respect from Jay's friends and also from law enforcement, I have to mention Stephen Kay, who was one of the main co-prosecutors, and also prosecutor Patrick Sakira, who handled a ton of the parole hearings, and also Donna Leibowitz, LA DA. I mean, people wanted to share this information, and because they knew the truth, and so in some of the big challenges that we faced, in other cases, it wasn't so challenging because of the respect for the truth and people realizing how important this story across the board really is.
Do you think that people knew back in the day, the days of the trial, that Bugliosi and his gang were just sitting there going, hey, whichever way it shakes out, we're going to write a book and make some money? I mean,
no, I don't think anybody knew that.
No, I'm sorry. Bugliosi's not here to argue with me. So,
well, I'll tell you what, I wish he was. And I also wish he would have sat down with me and did an interview, because I can tell you this, and this is not defamatory. This is not only, it's my direct experience and my opinion, really, but he declined to be interviewed numerous times. But
why?
Yeah, I wonder. Because I would have asked the typical questions, the contextual questions. Where does this lie in the historical pantheon of things, and how did it impact culture, blah, 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 blah. But then I would have said, Vince, you have this almost like psychiatric analysis of Jay. And I can tell you upwards of 70 to 80 people, not one person agreed with that. As a matter of fact, they're outraged and they scoff at this. Where did you get this information with? And I did speak with Kurt Gentry, and he said, I didn't write anything that had directly to do with the victims. And so he said he didn't, but I would have liked to have asked Vince a number of those questions. I would have asked him, why did you omit Jay's definitive actions? Not just once trying to attack, but twice. Why did you keep that out of your book? Well, the answer is, I know it. It's because he was the hero of his own true crime novel. He didn't want...
Right, because he didn't want... Jay actually died a hero.
That's exactly right.
But Bugliosi wanted to be the hero. So you can't have two heroes. So guess what? One has to be silenced, right?
Exactly correct. And also I think that, even Stephen Kay said it in, throughout the trial, he thought that Kurt was just a reporter. He didn't realize that Vince and Kurt Gentry were working on a book together. And I mean, he said this, I just thought that this was a guy that was a reporter, but no, they knew they were writing a book from the beginning of the trial.
Wow. Well, and I wonder how many Menendez books are in the works. It doesn't bring Jose and Kitty back, does it?
No.
That's a whole nother ball of wax for another show. I'd love to figure out what you feel is the Stockholm syndrome that's got hold of that family. It's just all too weird, isn't it?
It really is. I do think, though, that this notion of decarceration that has its tentacles in the state of California, whether it be through legislation or this kind of like victim propping the killers into victims. There's this whole there's a real movement in this. I mean, and then we had George Gascon, the previous DA, who on day one he issued a mandate for forbidding any involvement, even presence of a DA at all lifer parole hearings. Now, I point this out because lifer parole hearings are the worst of the worst. These are rapists, molesters, and killers. Now, why would the head DA forbid any DA involvement in this thing? And for many of our families, for my family, certainly, we have a lot of experience in this. And we, and so, yes, we were betrayed and left on our own by the LA DA's office. Not the current one. Nathan Hawkman is outstanding, by the way. And that's why he was elected massively. And so, but that's a whole nother point. But think of all the families that are impacted by rape, murder, and molestation, that this is their first parole hearing and they have no one to stand up to provide a legal representation or a voice. How did that happen? And how did anyone think that that was okay? Yeah,
there's a very interesting, I think I sent you a link to Burning Man before this unfortunate.
Oh, wait, I thought of you this morning.
This unfortunate death happened. I sent you a YouTube link where last year, two women, they called 911 because they'd been sexually attacked. And when the sheriff arrived, in order to get to speak to these people, the Burning Man Yellow Shirts security force said, now, please, you're on our land. And she's like, no, it's the state of Nevada, and I'm the county sheriff. So please, we don't know who the perpetrator is, and he hasn't been proven guilty in a court of law. So let's not refer to these ladies on camera as victims. Let's just call them survivors because we don't know if he's guilty yet.
It's disgusting. It's perverse. So now victims are perps. Yeah. And killers and rapists are victims, and they're given more protection through some of these things. That it's absolutely despicable, and it's like again, some of it's reinforced through legislation. This is insanity. Insanity.
I know, and it's all of this sort of helicopter parenting, and everybody wins. Little Johnny gets first place, little Janie gets second place, and everyone else gets a bronze medal because nobody loses.
That's right. I can tell you.
I say bullshit.
It is bullshit. You don't teach a child between if you'd done better, you might have won. Winning, there's winners and there's losers. If everybody's, they're there, never mind, you still get a medal. They'll all grow up to be victims.
Yeah. Let me tell you, when I messed up, my parents were from Detroit, and God blessed with a great family. But my dad was a city guy, and they had me at 18, 19, so they're very young. They're like my best friends, but they're also my parents. And so when I messed up, let me tell you something. If it was bad, I got a butt whooping. I was never abused. But it's true. And I got to tell you something. It taught me a couple of things. It taught me, don't ever do that crap again. Respect your parents. Respect society. Respect rules. It also taught me if I want to, but if I want to break the rules, maybe I have to develop a skill to cover my tracks. No, I'm joking. I mean, I wouldn't. But also, like I said, I was never abused or anything like that. But if I got cracked in the head or something out in the playground or out in the street, I can handle this. I wasn't shocked that the world was like this. The world is like that, and it teaches us.
Coming home from school at lunchtime and saying to my mom, I got the cane this morning
From the nuns.
From the nuns. They used to make you put your hand out and they'd smack you with a ruler usually.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't physically hurt. It was the emotional destruction, in front of the class. And she'd say, she'd get the hairbrush and get me behind the knees and smack me and say, well, you must have deserved it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, with us.
Why?
I went to Catholic school from first to 12th grade as well. And the nuns are, again, I would, when I got caught, but they would ask you, you want swats or do you want to have a letter sent to you that has to be signed by your parents? I said, I'll take the swats.
Oh, smack me.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not coming home with that because I would have got a beating, I would have been, but plus I would have been grounded. Whereas this, I get the swats and I can get out of there.
Well, and nowadays, the kids have cell phones and they call child abuse and they call.
Oh, God.
Services. And I was in a Ralph supermarket recently, and this kid was, the way they put all the chocolate and the candy and everything down low where the kids can see it at the checkouts, of course. So he's picking up Twix bars and this, that, and the other, and he's throwing them in the cart, and the mother's putting them back. And she said, no, you can't, you can't have all that candy. You've got your one, whatever he had, Toblerone or something. And he threw himself on the ground and started screaming, Mommy, don't beat me like you do at home.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh, but that is.
Well, it sounded like a casting session.
So I just took my glasses off very slowly, looked at the child, gave him the look from hell, and looked at the mother and looked in her cart and said, you don't have nearly enough vodka in there, sweetheart. There's not enough vodka in Russia would make me take that kid home. No. Mommy, don't beat me like you do at home. And
he's taught. It was a boy, right? Or no? Okay,
about 6.
He's taught this. He knows how to work the system now.
Absolutely. I used to just go cold on Ruth. I used to stay out of my sight. I don't want to see you. I'm not pleased with you. I don't want to see you.
Oh, that's the worst.
She used to go in her bedroom and tell her teddy bear, I wish you'd just smack me and be done with it.
Yeah, I've still got the teddy bear too.
Yeah.
Speaking of therapists. Yeah. Well, this has been absolutely just a stunning hour to spend with a new friend. Thank you, Marshall Terrill, so much. The name of the book and everything is going across the bottom. A few people have been saying they need to get it. It's called Cutting to the Truth. Is there a better or worse place for people to buy it? Do you care if it's Barnes & Noble, Amazon, a website you have?
No, I think that those are great. Amazon's great. Barnes & Noble I have not gone through. I mean, but they're very good, and also Genius Book Publishing. But so there's all kinds of different ways to get to it. But everybody seems to be on Amazon and But yeah, whatever you do, and thank you for really having such great care in regard for Jay Sebring's story. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. We watched your wonderful documentary, Cutting to the Truth, and we smiled at the nostalgia, and we cried for you at the end because it's just such a tragic story, and I'm so thrilled to be like one iota of a tiny part. We are to be able to have a fascinating historical contextual conversation for a whole hour and not say the M word because fuck him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's just a final thought. I had someone say to me, she said she wanted to do a documentary, and I politely declined. And she says, "Well, I was thinking of you when calling because I was thinking what a sad, tragic story Jay's is." And I said, I can understand based on the entrenched narratives how you would say that, but actually, if we look at the content of the entirety of Jay's 35 years here on this
What
planet.
a life he lived.
Absolutely. What he achieved, what he did, what he lived, and then even in the horrific final last moments that he chose to stand up to an evil against all odds. You had three people, two with hunting knives each, one with a man twice his size, armed with a gun and a bayonet, and twice he tried to, even in those horrific last moments, he was inspiring, he was glorious as a hero. And so Jay's story is quite, if we look at it in its substance, a beautiful, inspiring, glorious, and story, you know.
Right. I mean, and you say what he did and what he achieved, and the employment and the camaraderie and the multicultural people that he gathered around him. But, you know, the zeitgeist, the pop culture, and what he did for, you know, anti-racism and all of those things. It's, yes, it is tragic that the world lost him at 35. God only knows what he'd have gone on to produce. But when you think of most people at 35, they're just getting out of doctorate college, and, you know, some of them are still living with their parents.
I resemble that remark.
No, but he truly embodies the Jay Sebring brand to me. Now that I've, you know, seen your film and started to read the wonderful book with Marshall, he truly embodies the American dream. You can do it. You can do it. You just have to be coming from the right place in your heart. You have to have that one spark, and that one spark of his just turned into just a pop culture flame, and he changed so many lives.
Absolutely, and he continues to. I mean, if you drive up Laurel Canyon today, there's graffiti, and the graffiti on it is of the Jim Morrison haircut that Jay cut and styled for Jim. If you go to there's a restaurant on Sunset Boulevard where there's a big picture of that. You know, if you have these kids who wear Bruce Lee T-shirts and Jim Morrison shirts, and, you know, years ago it used to be where some people unfortunately would wear some of the Killers T-shirts, and sometimes they still do for shock value. But we're starting to see more people wear the Jim Morrison, and it's all Jay's legacy, and it's such a wonderful thing to see, you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Everybody's just one loving, incredible interview. Elizabeth Marianne says, "Can't thank you enough for today's presentation." I'm going to make myself cry now. Elizabeth, rest well, Jay. Anthony has your back. He certainly does.
I think it might be time for my limerick.
I think we need to pay respect to Anthony now and his whole team, including Marshall and everybody, for all the work they've done. You're probably not familiar, Anthony, but at the end of every show, Angie is the limerick lady, and we compose a little rhyme, which she has done, to thank our guests for their valuable and wonderful time and insight. So if you're sitting comfortably, then we shall begin. I'll let you do the count for the rhythm.
1, 2, 3. A nephew with purpose made clear, remembering his uncle so dear. Through writing and screen, recreating the scene, Jay Sebring's true voice we still hear.
Amen. That's so beautiful. Thank you so much.
It was a tough one because, you know, our limericks are always funny and cheeky and tongue-in-cheek and a bit bawdy and a bit salty, but and spent some time on this.
But now that I know you I might write some more of those.
Expect the salty one by email.
I was going to say, I'm ready for the body. I'm ready for the cheeky and the salty one now.
You'll get those on your DMs. She'll slide into your DMs.
Oh, in my PJs.
In your PJs. Well, this is fantastic. Everybody check out the documentary. You can find it through Amazon and Shout, called Cutting to the Truth, and the book of the same name, co-written with Marshall Terrill, our dear friend and multiple fantastic
And
author.
it actually features a little bit of our other dear friend, Ivor Davis.
Yeah, a little tiny bit of our dear friend Ivor Davis.
Yeah.
Yep. And so thank you once again, Anthony DiMaria. Check him out online and on IMDb, and watch for him and all of his new projects coming very soon. We'll see you guys all of a sudden. Be well. Bye-bye.
Amen. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to TeaFlix, and check out Dr. Angie's books, Organic Teas and CBD, at mrsmccartneysteas.com. Toodle pip.